I got about 500 kilometers on the Saucony Ride 15s, and it's about -7 Celsius right now. Not sure what the Fahrenheit is, but man, these shoes get pretty firm now.
How has the Ride 15 held up after 500 kilometers, and will this be my shoe through the winter months? Today, I hope to answer that question. This is my 500 kilometer review of the Saucony Ride 15. Hi everybody and welcome to today's video, and on today's video I want to talk to you about the Saucony Ride 15. Now if you follow my channel, you've probably seen that I've done a couple of reviews on this shoe so far. I did an initial review, I actually even did a little bit of an update once I reached 200 miles. The other day, loaded my run to Strava and realized I've crept over the 500 kilometer mark in this shoe. Now I think there's a lot of good solid kilometers left in this shoe, and if it's any indication, spoiler alert, this shoe has been working out really well for me. That's why I've been able to put in so many miles. And I also know that a lot of shoe reviewers just have so many shoes to get to, so they don't have the opportunity to take something quite this far. So we're gonna go over a couple of different things. I'll briefly talk about some of the specs on this shoe. Then we're just gonna go over exactly how the shoe is held up to the 500 kilometers so far. And then lastly, how am I gonna use this going forward? Because seasons have changed up here, and that has changed how I feel about this shoe and what I'm going to use it for. By up here, I live in Eastern Canada, so we get lots of snow, lots of ice, lots of cold weather, and that really does change how this shoe performs for me. First of all, let's jump into just looking at a couple of the specs of this shoe. We'll go over this very briefly before we get into how the shoe's held up. Now the Saucony Ride 15 does come in at 8.8 ounces or 249 grams. That's in a US men's size 9. It has an 8mm offset, an 8mm drop. That's 35 millimeters in the heel and 27 millimeters in the forefoot. It is made up of Saucony's Power Run midsole, so no Power Run Plus or Power Run PB in this, just Saucony's regular Power Run midsole. And it has a lightweight, breathable mesh upper. All right, so let's get into talking about how this shoe is held up to the 500 kilometers, starting with taking a look at this upper. And I've got to be honest with you, this upper still looks really good. No wear and tear issues with it at all. I don't have the same hole developing that I had in the Saucony Triumph 19s. I did a review of the Triumph 19 at around 300 miles, and it had developed a hole even though the rest of the shoe was fine. So no problems there with the Ride 15. And one of the spots where I tend to see a little bit more wear in some of my shoes, for better or worse, is back here around the heel collar, but nothing at all. It looks really good. Tongue still is in great shape, still protecting my feet from those laces. So overall, the upper is held up really well. If we move on down to that midsole, you will see some creasing, but really honestly nothing too severe. Now this is, as I mentioned before, just Saucony's Power Run midsole. So it's not the Power Run PB or not even the Power Run Plus. So it doesn't have the greatest amount of energy return to begin with, but I haven't felt a whole lot of difference from when I first got this shoe in terms of the energy return. Still has a little bit of softness to it. Again, it's never been the softest shoe in the world, but it hasn't changed that much over time. It actually softened up from when I first ran in the shoe. Now I will say that has changed a little bit since we've gotten into the colder weather, but we're going to talk about that in a couple minutes and when I talk about how I'm going to use this shoe moving forward. If we look at the outsole of this shoe, that's where we probably see the most wear, like you would expect in most running shoes at 500 kilometers or more. And there is kind of smooth out here at the toe off, where I normally toe off in my shoe. That's to be expected. It still feels fine traction-wise when I'm out there and the roads are in good shape. It's not wet or icy or anything like that, so I'm still getting lots of traction out of this shoe. When you move on down through that outsole, there's still a lot of rubber, still a lot of life in this shoe. You will see that I've chewed away at the midsole right in the middle here a little bit, but that's mostly because the midsole came up to the same level as the outsole rubber when you bought the shoe new. So the fact that that's worn out a little bit in the midsole, exposed midsole, is not a surprise to me at all. Now, if we go to the back of the shoe and look at the rubber, the outsole on the back of this shoe, there is still tons of rubber left back there protecting that midsole. So overall, outsole still in great shape, midsole still holding up well, upper is holding up like a champ. It's almost like a brand new shoe when we're just looking at the upper. Hi guys, if you're liking this video so far, please consider subscribing to my channel and hit that thumbs up button. And also comment in the comment section down below, what is your go-to shoe through those winter months? Now we get to talk about how I'm going to use this shoe moving forward. Keep in mind, as I mentioned before, I live up here in Eastern Canada. So over the next number of months, we're going to get lots of snow, slush, ice, cold weather, all sorts of things thrown at us. And I'm going to try to spend as little time on the treadmill as possible this winter. So what I have on my feet is pretty important in terms of just how comfortable it's going to be out there on my run. And the Saucony Ride 15 has a couple of things going for it and a couple of things just might not make it work for me. But if we talk about the upper of the shoe, one of the things I didn't complain about during the summer months, but it's not the most breathable upper. Now it's breathable enough where it was still comfortable, it wasn't hot, but it's certainly not as breathable as something like the Endorphin Speed that I have back there on the shelf somewheres. I took the Endorphin Speed out for a tempo run the other night and it was about minus 10 degrees Celsius. I'll put the Fahrenheit up here on the screen, but the wind was blowing through that shoe and it got really, really cold. I haven't had that same issue with the Ride 15. It's been fairly warm pair of socks, and it's okay during those winter months. One thing I am concerned about, and it was something that I mentioned in one of my other reviews of this shoe, was that this upper does take on a decent amount of water, or at least it did for me, which made the shoe feel a little bit clunky. A little bit worried about that because as we run through some of the slush in the winter months, just worried about that feeling of clunkiness as we get out there running in the winter in the snow and the slush. The midsole is one of the big concerns I have with this shoe because this Power Run midsole, just the material that it's made out of, really firms up in the cold. And as I've mentioned, as a lot of people have mentioned, the Ride 15 is already on the firm side when it comes to a daily trainer, and it really kind of turns into a little bit of a block. So if I've got clear roads and I'm hitting the pavement directly, not traveling over some of that snow that we get here, which kind of makes it kind of soft when you're running, but if I'm hitting that hard pavement or that hard concrete in the cold weather and I'm running with the Saucony Ride 15 with the Power Run midsole, it's gonna feel pretty hard. So it's probably gonna be limited to fairly short runs for that reason. Now, if we look at the outsole of this shoe, honestly, it's done better than I expected when it comes to winter running. The outsole has gripped fairly well. Of course, in the toe off, this being smoothed out really kind of affects how it's going to do on the ice, and it's certainly not going to do as well as a trail shoe. I went on a run earlier today and I took the Salomon Pulsar trails because I knew there was going to be ice. And I wasn't going to run with this shoe on that. But if it's just sort of a daily run, I'm not too concerned about that outsole being able to make it through the months here. Again, if we go back, the big concern I have is probably with that midsole. So I am still going to put some extra kilometers on this shoe through the winter months, but it's not going to be my go-to that often because as I log longer miles, as I get further into my marathon prep, I just think I'm not gonna feel so great at the end of the run with this ice block under my feet. That's it, guys. That's my longer term review of the Saucony Ride 15 after 500 kilometers. Still a really solid shoe, holding up really well. I just don't know if it's going to be the shoe that I'm going to put a lot of kilometers on during these winter's months. My name is Matt, and this is What Matters to Matt, and ultimately, what matters to me most is my family. I'll see you guys in the next video.
Step 1, wake up early, gonna rise with the sun. Step 2, get some good, some food in you. Step 3, think real hard about what you wanna be. Step 4, everybody just do your thing.
Wake up, today's gonna be a good day. Wake up.